Greetings, Earth. You're listening to the New Green Podcast on Hubski.com. Today we talk...
Quiet.
What's that?
Quiet.
All right.
Quiet.
All right. Shh. Okay. I'm just trying to do a Okay. I'll be quiet. Today's topic is silence.
When do you find you most crave silence?
That's Steve.
At times like this.
How can we go to Grandma's house? Can we go to the Lego store again?
It seems that every day gets a little bit louder. Whether it be children playing, construction, traffic, a plane overhead, or a bird that just won't stop singing. Every day, silence becomes a little bit more golden. Today on the podcast, we talk about silence. What is it? Why do we crave it? Is it even attainable?
Whenever you talk to somebody about somewhere they were where they're really silent, you can say, "So what did you hear?"
That's Climb Blue.
And they have an answer. They always have an answer. When they're talking about silence, they'll say, "Oh, it was nothing but the wind rushing in the trees," or "I heard nothing but water dripping down the side of the cavern," or "It was nothing but me and a few birds in a distant airliner somewhere high up in the sky." And I think that comes from the fact that we orient ourselves based on what we hear, and we never hear nothing. You listen to the dawn chorus or the evening chorus of birds, and it's basically a bunch of critters screaming to the rooftops, "I survived, come have sex with me." Because control of your acoustic environment means that there's nothing nastier out there that's trying to eat you. And whenever you hear true silence, or you hear more silence than you anticipate, or things suddenly get quiet when you're not expecting it, it sets your hackles on edge because you expect something bad to happen. We're trained for that. If every critter around you shuts the hell up, that means they know something you don't. That means that it's time to put head down and make sure the lion eats you last.
Silence can be a disconcerting thing. Has it always been this way? Have we always oriented ourselves through sound?
And many primates share our intense feelings of loneliness and sadness when they are away from close kin.
That's Cadell Last of the AdvancedApes.com.
Take the famous chimpanzee Nim Chimpsky, for example. Towards the end of his life, Nim was moved to a farm and put in isolation. He did not get to interact with any other chimpanzees or animals. He developed an intense depression, and it may have ended his life prematurely. Like chimpanzees, the human brain has evolved to thrive and get immense enjoyment out of interaction with members of our own species. We love sharing ideas, thoughts, and emotions. And that's not to say that many of us don't enjoy occasional solitude or silence. But most humans find their meaning for life in building connections with other people.
If you're in a group setting, silence can be almost worse. Silence can be bad.
That's Captain Ozone.
If you're in a group and you're in this conversation and it's going, and then there's just dead silence, it could stop everything. You could have a great train of thought, and then it just stops. And that it's a killer thing.
So if silence denotes danger and can make us uncomfortable, why do some people seek it out?
Recently, I'd say within the last year or so, I started enjoying taking longer walks through the city.
That's Genius Utwork.
When I first started these, I would always listen to my music or podcast or something on my iPhone. I have started stopping that and just kind of walking and enjoying the ambience. And it's a very peculiar feeling for me to experience this silence that I don't normally do. The first thing that always comes to mind when you do this is you start noticing all of the things you don't notice normal. None of the bullshit with like a city having a pulse or anything like that, but it's just it has a feel to it though.
So more and more, it sounds like we're talking about quiet or peacefulness rather than silence. Two very different things.
I just woke up in the middle of my nap and I was just struck by the sound of silence. Sorry, there's no way to get around that Simon and Garfunkel reference.
That's Clive Watson of triplesequitur.com, speaking about an experience he recently had after the passing of his mother.
And it's paradoxical too, because it wasn't silent. I was just listening to a bunch of space. I could hear birds behind me, possibly at the bird feeders that my mom was all about, like having the bird feeders and watching the birds. And the sound of wind chimes on the far porch, on the back porch. And you could just hear them, again, at a distance, you could hear them. And these sounds created a space that was bordered by those sounds. And I could hear all of the space within those sounds that was silent and empty. And it was very expressive of the absence that we were experiencing at that time. But it was also beautiful.
So how is it that we learn to appreciate quiet when everything in our instincts tells us to flee it?
When I was about 10 years old, I was on a family vacation with my uncle.
That's Flagamuffin.
I ended up sitting watching, some meaningless TV show, sports or something with my uncle, and he was writing, and we weren't talking really. He finally looked up and I just muted the TV, and I guess I asked him why he didn't want to watch sports with me or whatever, because I was extremely young. And he said something that I'll never forget. He basically said that silence and quiet and peace had played an extremely important role in his life, that he preferred them to noise. And I guess I couldn't understand that at my age at all, wanting silence and as opposed to action. But it was one of those moments that literally changed how I thought. You never can tell exactly what's going to impact a kid for the rest of his life, but that was the sort of thing that did.
So should we turn off the TV more often? Should we value silence more than we do?
People are too noisy or too thoughtful. They speak too much without listening enough. We're always taking in information. We're not quietly processing our own enough.
That's MK.
I suppose that might be true. Yeah, it's probably true. So yes, I don't think people probably value silence enough. However, if you go into the middle of the United States, it's really quiet out there. And I have to imagine that most people that live outside the cities are pretty used to quiet moments from time to time. You almost can escape it if you get out into Kansas or Oklahoma. I've driven through there and just walk into your car in a rest stop or a gas station or something, it's there, it's quiet.
Some people, they can't stand silence. It's deafening to them.
That's Steve.
You take a kid out of New York City and plop him out in the Grand Canyon, he's going to freak out because of the quiet. And vice versa, you take my brother-in-law out of Wyoming and plop him in New York City, and he breaks out into hives because of just the raw, unrelenting noise of the city. Each person has their own amount of silence that they require to get through the day and get through their life.
Maybe it's not so much that we need more silence, but that when we do make noise, maybe we need to be a little more conscientious about how we break silence, what we say and what we do. But I guess that's kind of a general truism, right?
Just being in a completely quiet environment, just sitting there, the human body puts off about 15 dB of noise just in heartbeat. Not even the little noises you make while you breathe or whatever. Your heart pumps at about 15 dB. So when you're truly honestly hearing 0 dB, for one thing, it's really hard to do. You need to make a special room with nothing going on in it, and it's called an anechoic chamber. But the fact that you can't even hear your own heart, your own lips smacking because there's nothing bouncing off the walls, makes you wonder psychologically what giant monster is about to eat me, because this is not a natural environment.
I think you made a good point, though, about, the contrast between sound and silence.
That's Olive Watson.
And what I've been thinking about this whole time is in music, when you read music, they write in the rests. I mean, there's like a representation for the rest, for the point where there is no sound. And I think we privilege the sound and we forget to take the rests, or we forget to think about them as something concrete. But when you're reading music, it is concrete. It's right there on the page. Mm-hmm. This is a moment where there is no sound.
Yeah.
We privilege the sound and forget to take the rests. Well said, Olive. The true genius shudders at incompleteness and usually prefers silence to saying something which is not everything it should be. Edgar Allan Poe. As Klein Blue stated, absolute silence, well, that's kind of creepy and terrifying. But quiet and peacefulness, well, I'll take that any day. The question to the community is, where do you find yours? Where do you find your peace, your quiet, your solitude? I'd like to thank Steve, Klein Blue, MK, Genius at Twerk, Flagamuffin, Captain Ozone, Cadell Last of the Advanced Apes, Clive Watson of TripleSequitur.com, and Olive Watson for your help with the podcast. Thanks, Hubski. Don't be too silent. I look forward to hearing from you.
In restless dreams I walked alone, narrow streets of cobblestone.